Kira and welcome to the first weekend of September, which can only mean one thing. It is now socially acceptable to be as excited about autumn as I have been for the last couple of months, which is a really nice feeling, and this week I have felt so much joy every time I've gone on TikTok because everyone else has started to share autumn baking videos, autumn aesthetics. There's been loads and loads of Harry Potter going back to Hogwarts ones this week because obviously it was the 1st of September, and I just feel like every time I open TikTok it's just like such a serotonin boost of autumn vibes, and I am absolutely here for it. And in that spirit of embracing autumn and all of its wonderful cozy vibes, I'm about to try and do some more autumn homeware shopping, because if you saw last week's vlog, you'll know that I tried and spectacularly failed to find some autumn homeware pieces because York just let me down in the most dramatic sense last weekend. I went into every single homeware shop I could think of, anywhere that might have anything from mugs, plates, bowls to candles, and nowhere had anything autumnal, and I cannot express how disappointed I was coming home with absolutely nothing to add autumn spirit to my house. But today Jay and I are ditching York, which has just let us down and is now in the bad books, and we're going over to Leeds, which has two crucial shops that I absolutely love that York doesn't have. The first one is Anthropologie, which is, as many of you will know, my go-to mug shop, and my mug collection is sorely lacking autumnal mugs. And last week I saw my friend Morgan Long posted a new autumnal vlog, which was just so wonderful in every sense, but specifically she went into Anthropologie and found these gorgeous pumpkin shaped mugs, but that are like really classy neutral tones rather than like a garish orange, and they were so cute that I immediately had to look and see if they were on the UK Anthropologie website, and they are. So I don't know if they'll have them in stock. I'm trying to keep my expectations low, but fingers crossed they have them because they were so beautiful. If not, I'm sure Anthropologie won't let me down and there will be some other good things in there, especially they have like some gorgeous like bowls and plates and things like that. So fingers crossed Anthropologie will deliver, because it always does, to be honest. Then the second shop that I'm going to be going into is HomeSense, which is my go-to candle shop, and autumn is the perfect time to refresh my candle stores because I feel like it's time to start getting those like cinnamony, appley, Christmassy, piney kind of scents that just feel so wonderful at this time of year. Then straight after doing autumnal shopping, which fingers crossed is going to go well, I'm manifesting good vibes, we're then going out to celebrate my dad's birthday this afternoon. So I think Saturday is going to disappear in a flash, but once we're home, if I'm awake and ready to do some reading, I have three really good books on the agenda for this weekend. Two of them are ones that I've already been reading. So of course we first of all have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which is just autumn personified in my opinion. It is so dark, so creepy, but just like so intriguing, and also very like descriptive, so it just feels so wonderful as like an immersive dark autumnal read. So I'm excited to carry on with this one. It is of course a reread and one that I know I love, so I'm excited to read some more because it has been a while since I've made it through the entire book, and I just know that I'm gonna love it. I'm about 55 pages in at the moment, so about 3/4 of the book left to read, and I'm excited to get through that at some point, hopefully this weekend, but I'm keeping my expectations realistic because my priority read for the weekend is The School for Good Mothers, which is a dystopian I started in last week's vlog, and it is so interesting. It's about a woman who loses custody of her child, and in a bid to try and get this back, she ends up going to this like residential program for other mothers who have also had their children taken away, where they're forced to try and learn how to become a good parent. It's very interesting, very dystopian, and just such an intriguing read that leaves you feeling so, I guess, like uncertain about what's right and wrong in this situation. So it's really interesting, and this is my top priority for the weekend because I really want to know how it ends. Then finally, I've just been really craving some thrillers, and I feel like my shelves do not have enough thrillers on them, but one that I do have is The Maid by Nita Prose, which has actually been on my shelves for quite a while now, and the blurb of this one is really intriguing to me because it kind of sounds a little bit like Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine in the way that the main character is described, because it says, Molly Gray is not like everyone else. She struggles with social skills and misreads the intentions of others. Her gran used to interpret the world for her, codifying it into simple rules that Molly could live by. Since Gran died a few months ago, 25-year-old Molly has been navigating life's complexities all by herself. So that bit I feel like has Eleanor Oliphant vibes in terms of a young woman, female protagonist who's like uncertain about how to navigate life and social conventions and things like that. But then the thriller comes in when it says that Molly is working as a maid at a hotel, and it says Molly's orderly life is upended the day that she enters the suite of the infamous Charles Black, only to find it in a state of disarray and Mr. Black himself dead in the bed. Before she knows what's happening, Molly's unusual demeanour has police targeting her as their lead subject. So interesting, and I feel like it's like Eleanor Oliphant meets thriller, and I can't wait to read it. So, although today is looking very, very busy, my Sunday is a bit quieter, and I have 3 excellent books waiting for me. But for now, welcome to the weekend, let's go shopping. Good morning guys and happy Sunday. It is now time to go through my autumn homeware haul, which I'm so excited about. I haven't opened any of the things or like unpackaged them because I thought we could do that together. The first thing is the only thing that is not wrapped up, and that is probably the least exciting to look at but a very welcome addition to my house, and that is this candle which I picked up from Home Sense. It is a maple pumpkin scented candle, and even without lighting it, downstairs in the kitchen where it's been overnight, it smells so good. It's slightly different to the usual autumn candles that I would go for because I'm generally a fan of quite like spicy cinnamony type candles, and this doesn't have any of that. It's a very like sweet one, but it smells so good and was definitely the nicest one that we could find in Home Sense. And I also love the like label on it, which is made out of like a fabric rather than paper. I just think it's very subtle but super cute. So this is the candle, and I'm excited to light this one later today because I think it's going to smell so incredible. It already does, but you know, it's just going to be even nicer when it's actually lit. So the next thing I picked up was not the mug that I was hoping for, but one that caught my eye and I really liked, from none other than Anthropology. And I thought this one was very cute. Unfortunately, they didn't have the pumpkin mug that I was hoping for, but I think this one is definitely a nice autumnal one. There's not like garish or Halloweeny, it's just like a bit of an autumn vibe. So it is an owl mug with like a floral design, and we have this one owl. I think Jay said this is a long-eared owl on this side, and then on the opposite side there is a barn owl. And I just think the colours, and like the inside has a design as well, and I just think, yeah, the floral colours just look very autumnal, and some of them actually are like pumpkins around the top as well. So I feel like it's autumnal enough without being like too over the top, and it's also a really good size, which is important when choosing a mug, and I think this is so cute. Very happy with it. The next 2 things I picked up were plates. So the first one I think I'm going to get a lot of use out of, and the second one is so gorgeous that I think it's going to be a bit more decorative. So the first one is so beautiful. It is this mushroom plate design, which I just think is incredible. I think it's so cute, and again, like the owl mug, I just think goes so well and looks like very autumnal in vibe, and just gives off like foragey, cottage, woodland, forest vibes, but without being like in your face. This is an autumn mug or an autumn plate, and I think that's really nice. So I'm excited to use this one. I feel like this is gonna be my go-to like cake plate, because I feel like it's a special plate, too special for like just your average slice of toast, but very cute, and I'm excited to use it. And then finally, not necessarily autumnal, but too cute, simply too cute to leave behind in the shop. It is this plate, which is a gorgeous rabbit that says bonjour in the bottom, and I just thought this rabbit was so cute. It's obviously a different colour to Gatsby, but it's a similar like Netherland dwarf style rabbit, which Jay and I both love, and this was just adorable. If I was insanely rich, I would have been coming home with several more plates, because there was also a hedgehog plate that was really cute, and then also one that had a cat on it that said une tasse de thé, and it was pouring a cup of tea, and it was so cute. But the rabbit ended up being the one that we had to go for, and then it has these little ladybirds around the edges as well, and I just thought it was so cute. So I, for one, am very happy with that little homeware haul. I feel like all of the things I got were really great, and I was also glad to come away with some more decorative plates, because we have some nice bowls. I obviously have lots of nice mugs, so this is just another one to add to the collection. In terms of plates that we have, they're pretty much just like plain white boring standard plates, so it's nice to have a couple of plates with a bit more personality. So very pleased with that haul. Like I said, it is now Sunday morning, and this morning I'm going out for the final coffee with Em. I mentioned in last week's vlog that Em is moving away from York, which is so sad, and this is her last weekend here, so we're going to our favourite place, Brew and Brownie Bakehouse, for coffee and cake this morning. And it's so sad because she is basically the only person I go there with, so not only is it my last time going there with Em, it's probably the last time I'll really be in there at all, because it's just going to be too sad to go in there without her. So going out to do that. Then this afternoon we're going to watch the F1 race with my dad and my brother, but I am going to be bringing my book, The School for Good Mothers, along with me to that F1 watching trip, because I think I'll just try and get some reading done in the background while everyone is watching the race and the coverage, because although I'm interested in that, I'm also desperate to read some more of this book, and that is going to be the first chance I have to read any all weekend. So happy Sunday, let's go and get coffee and cake. Okay, so far sourdough baking seems to be going well. I've just transferred it from the bowl into the dish that I'm going to be hopefully baking it in, which I feel like is going to make a really nice loaf, although who knows until it actually comes out of the oven. But now I'm just going to leave it to rise a second time. Jay and I are going to head out for a little walk, and then hopefully when we come back it should be ready to put in the oven. I must admit I'm slightly nervous about timings, because it's going to be a bit tight to bake it before we go out to go and watch the race, but then also if we leave it till afterwards it's going to be late for dinner, so I don't really know what we're going to do in that sense. But I think I'm just going to see how much it's risen by the time we come back from our walk, and then make a judgment call at that point. But very excited to eat it, and I have made sure to oil this loaf very well, because last time I thought I'd oiled quite well, but the dough still stuck a little bit at the bottom, which made it really hard to get out of the tin. And because this is like a circular one, I think it's going to be even harder to get out if it's not properly oiled, so I'm hoping that does the trick. But yeah, going out for a walk, and then we'll see what happens next. So it is now Monday morning and I'm very happy to say that before starting work I was able to finish off the last couple of chapters of The School for Good Mothers, and I thought this book was so good. I've obviously been singing its praises for the last 2 vlogs now, so I feel like that review is probably not too unexpected, but finishing it just really solidified my opinion, and I thought it was so interesting and really well written. I think possibly just because of the theme being so focused on women and children and the concept of motherhood, it felt very similar to The Handmaid's Tale in some ways, but obviously quite a distinct and unique concept, although just I think the base level and the way that the story unfolded had that level of similarity to The Handmaid's Tale and the way that that story was written, and I'm a big fan of that book because I think that feeling of similarity and just common themes just made me a lot more interested in this novel. But like I said, it has enough of its own unique personality to make it stand out, but the bits that were similar were bits that were equally interesting in both novels, if that makes sense. I think what makes this book so interesting is the way that you feel so complicated as the reader when trying to formulate your opinions on it, because you feel so much empathy for particularly our main character Frida, but also all of the other mothers that she's surrounded with at this residential school where they're trying to learn to be good parents again. And I feel like there's just this sensation of the odds being stacked against them, and you recognise that while they've done bad things, there is also a desire for them to try and be better, and they're kind of being led down this path of believing that they can, but you as the reader start to think are they actually ever going to be able to redeem themselves, or are they kind of just being led on this sense of false hope and it's not ever going to really happen? So I feel like there's just a massive roller coaster, and because of that, although you recognise what has been done wrong and the fact that potentially re-education is a good thing, you also recognise that potentially the way that it's being unfolded is cruel almost, in the sense that it's giving people hope that might not be there. So I feel like it was just really interesting to watch it unfold, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars just because I feel like the book on the whole was so well written, so interesting and so detailed, but the conclusion just felt a tiny bit rushed in my opinion. So that was the only thing stopping me from giving it 5 stars, but on the whole, so good. If you like The Handmaid's Tale, I'd say you definitely enjoy this one, but if you haven't read any dystopians before, I feel like this would be a really good one to kind of enter into the genre, I guess, because it's a dystopian, but not in the sense of a post-apocalyptic survival scenario. It's one that's very recognisable when you compare it to our own society, but just has these slight, very unnerving differences, and I feel like those dystopians are sometimes the most interesting. So would highly recommend this to absolutely everyone, but especially if you are a fan of things like The Handmaid's Tale. And then the only other thing that I've been doing this morning is trying to make another loaf of sourdough. You might have seen from yesterday's loaf that it kind of exploded out of the tin that we put it in, and I kind of had to wrestle with it to get it out of the pot. And then the base, which I had oiled to try and prevent sticking, which clearly didn't work, had then made the base of the dough very greasy, so the texture of the bottom crust was not what I was hoping for, and it wasn't the nicest to eat. The flavour of the top, so I guess the top half of the loaf and the top crust that you could see at the at the top of the pot, was actually really tasty, so the flavour combo is down, and I'm pretty pleased with that, but I think it's just the texture of the dough that I need to work on. The crust crumb was a bit tighter than I was hoping for, and when I made my sourdough a couple of weeks ago, it was really nice and aerated, which is what I was going for, but yesterday's one, I think the dough was maybe a little bit too wet, and then it just got a bit heavy and gluey in the pot. So basically what I've decided to do is make a much smaller loaf this time, at least half of what I've been making normally, and just try and get down the quantities and the hydration level that is going to work best. And this time around I'm trying to make it a bit stiffer, I guess would be the way to describe it, so that it can hold its own shape rather than having to go in a pot, and then hopefully that will avoid any issues of sticking, and I won't have to use any oil either. So that's what I'm doing today. It's currently just in its rising process, so I'll be putting this in the oven at lunchtime, and hopefully we'll end up with a more successful loaf than yesterday. But yeah, the sourdough chronicles continue. Good morning guys. So I have just brewed myself a lovely cup of tea in my new autumn mug. It is the blueberry pancakes flavour tea from Bird & Blend. If you were watching my vlogs a couple of weeks ago, you'll know that they were very kind as to send me a box of a few different flavours of their tea, and it's been actually a few weeks since I've actually tried one of them, so I thought this morning that I would do the blueberry pancakes one because that just sounded exceptional. So first of all, let's find out what is actually in this tea, because it says flippin' delicious sweet blueberries and blackberries on pancakes, and then the blend of tea is rooibos, which is a big win for me because I'm a big fan of rooibos tea, hibiscus, freeze-dried blueberry, apple pieces, blackcurrant leaves, rosehip, elderflower, orange peel, blue cornflowers, mallow flowers and natural flavourings. So let's give it a smell. I've actually left this to brew for about 10 minutes, so I'm hoping it's like a nice strong flavour. The smell is a blend of rooibos, which is obviously like quite a strong smell, and then like I think what's coming from the mallow flowers is a really sweet vanilla kind of scent that it almost just smells like a cup of marshmallow, which I'm definitely not complaining about. So without further ado, cheers to blueberry pancake tea. Ooh. Oh, that is good. Wow. Oh god, I want to make another cup of this immediately because I feel like this is going to last me about 2 minutes flat. Oh my god, so the instant hit that you get is the smell, which is obviously the rooibos and then the mallow flavour. And so you get this like immediate sweetness, which obviously is like a very vanilla-y flavour, so it's got like a really like cosy, wholesome vibe as soon as you like take a sip, but then you get like this burst of something a little bit more fruity that I'm assuming is like the blueberries or the blackberry leaves maybe, and I feel like it's just a really nice blend where fruit teas can tend to be like a bit bitter or like very, I don't know how to describe it, like quite like yeah, like berryish, bittery taste. Like you get like a raspberry tea and it's like quite a sour tea, whereas this one I feel like has a perfect blend of sweetness and then that freshness from the berries, and it makes a really lovely combination where it's like refreshing but also like very cozy. So big fan of this one. That actually might be one of my favourite Bird & Blends that I've had so far. I think I'm a big fan of all of their like chai blends, and they had a lot of them in the advent calendar last year, which I was a big fan of, but of the ones that are not chai, I think that might be one of my favourites, although I kind of feel like that each time I try a new one. But the reason I actually felt inspired to try Bird & Blend tea this morning is because I just had another delivery, which was this, and if you'll see here it says do not open until December 1st if you can wait, and then that is, surprise surprise, my tea advent calendar. This was not gifted, I purchased this myself because I loved the tea advent calendar so much last year, and they sell out really quickly, so I signed up to be like notified as soon as they went on sale, ordered it immediately, and it arrived this morning, which was so exciting. So it has a Christmas magic inside, and obviously I won't be opening this one for quite a few months now, but I'm so excited to know that it's waiting for me, and I'm sure it's going to be just as delicious as last year's one was. But for now I shall enjoy this blueberry pancake tea, as well as all of the other ones I still have yet to taste, so I need to pick back up with my tea taste test because this one and also the treacle sponge that I had last time, so good. Currently Saturday the 10th of September, and I'm feeling so nervous because tomorrow the 11th of September is the day of my half marathon that I've been training for the past like 4 months. It's the Great North Run, which is a huge event, and at the time of booking a half marathon that seemed like a great idea because me and Katie, the person I'm running with, thought big event, great atmosphere, should be fun. But the closer it's gotten to it, the more I've realised exactly how big this event is, and when I googled it earlier September, the Great North Run is supposed to have 60,000 runners, and London Marathon, which is also a huge event, apparently has 50,000 runners. So that just puts it into perspective, like how big this event is, and just like, yeah, how many people are going to be there. But I'm trying to put my anxieties aside because I know deep down that I've prepared for the race, I can do the distance, and it should be fine. And so realistically, I shouldn't be too nervous, but something about events and lining up on a start line and having to wait for a particular time to get moving just makes me so nervous. But I'm trying to just put that aside and think about how great it will be that I will have done the Great North Run and run a first like official half marathon. Obviously have done the distance in training, but this will be the first time like getting an official time and getting a medal and a finisher t-shirt. So very excited for that part and finishing it, but nervous to start it. And then I think I'll actually enjoy the experience once I'm running, but I think it's just, yeah, the waiting around that is so nerve-wracking. But have my race number, and I'm currently just packing because I'm setting off this afternoon to go up to Newcastle where the race is. I'm just gathering and making sure I've not forgotten anything important, which is such a me thing to do. I would be like the sort of person to forget, yeah, my race number or the shoes that I need to wear or my running outfit. So I'm making sure to take my time with packing, make sure I've got everything so that that will at least be one less thing to stress and get nervous about. But I'm getting the train up to Newcastle this evening on my own. Jay is staying here tonight because obviously we have Oscar and he will need feeding and letting out and all that jazz. So Jay is going to come up to the finish line tomorrow and see me actually finish the race and then drive back together. But today I'm just getting the train up on my own, meeting my friend Katie up there, and we're staying in a hotel, gonna get some dinner and then just get an early night before setting off with like 60,000 other people to run half marathon tomorrow. So kind of crazy, but exciting nonetheless, and also quite relieved that it is going ahead because this week we had the huge news that the Queen had passed away, which put into spin loads of different things because certain events and sporting things and entertainment things were being cancelled out of respect. But the Great North Run, after some deliberation and a lot of anxiety for participants, decided in the end to go ahead. So at one point this week we weren't even sure if it was going to be happening, so very excited that it is. Extraordinarily nervous, but mostly very excited. So there we have it. But of course, because I'm going to be going up on the train, I'm planning to do a little bit of reading. However, I also am only taking one bag with me and having to fit that with most of my things that I'll need tomorrow, like breakfast stuff, clothes, shoes, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not bringing any physical books just because trying to be as light as I can in my bag. So instead I've downloaded a couple of books on Audible because I haven't actually listened to an audiobook in ages, but this seemed like the perfect opportunity. The first one is called Out and Back, and I can't remember who it's by. I know the person's first name is Hillary. I can't for the life of me remember their last name. I downloaded it earlier this week because I was watching a running vlog by Flora Beverly, and she was talking about listening to this book by an ultra runner on one of her runs, and it sounded really interesting. From what I understand, Hillary was like a really successful rising star in the ultra running community, and then had an accident on a run, and it's kind of all about like the coming back from that process and obviously the impact that had on her life and obviously her sport as well. And then the other book I've downloaded I'm very excited for, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which is a memoir. So both of the books I've downloaded are memoirs. But Jeanette McCurdy, for those of you who don't know, I feel like most of you will, but she is or was one of the co-stars of iCarly when she was a young actress, and she played Sam in that show, and she was like, yeah, a popular Nickelodeon child star, and now as an adult has reflected on the fact that she was kind of pushed down that path by her mum, and kind of reveals the fact that child stardom, I mean, I feel like now in the modern age we all kind of know it's not something to aspire to because it has such potential to have negative effects on young people for like years and years to come afterwards. But I feel like she's kind of just exposing that from her own perspective, and it's quite interesting because I think oftentimes we only get to see the negative repercussions of child stars when something tragic happens, and then people kind of reflect and it's a very somber tone. But in this instance it's someone who has kind of like dealt with their issues and has like come back from it and is able to reflect on it. So while I think the book is probably going to be quite sobering and difficult to read in parts, I also think it's probably going to be quite an uplifting story, or rather like recollection of experiences, because obviously we know that she is like pulled through and is able to kind of like process and move on from what happened in her childhood. So very excited for that one, and I think that'll probably be my first pick, or first listen rather, on the train up. But for now, just going to gather all of my things, make sure I haven't forgotten content, anything, set off to Newcastle, and then yeah, listen to some audiobooks and try not to stress too much about how nervous I am for tomorrow's run. Alright, so it is 6:35 in the evening on Sunday. I'm home and I'm very happy to say that I finished the Great North Run. This is the medal and I think it's a very nice one actually, so I'm pleased with that. And then on the back it talks about the Great North Run, so as medals go, I'm pretty pleased with this one. The race itself was so hard. So bear in mind, if you watched a vlog a couple of weeks ago, you'll know that I did the half marathon distance in training because I wanted to know that I could definitely do it. And in York it was a lovely run, a long run, a challenging one, but enjoyable nonetheless. But in the Newcastle event setting, it was, and I don't want to be dramatic here when I say horrific, it was constant uphill. I think that there were maybe like 2 or 3 maximum like declines for the entire race, and the rest was pretty much like always at just like either a proper hill or like a steady incline, which it's just so tough when you're used to running on flat. And if any of you guys know York at all, you'll know that it's a very flat city. There are hardly any hills. I think there might be like 1 in the city centre, so it's not very easy to practice hill training around here. And so although I was like fully prepared for the distance, the elevation and just like running regularly on a lot of hills was not something I was prepped for. So in that sense it was a lot harder, and I think also the elevation made a knee injury that has been with me since 2020. At the beginning of 2020, Jay and I decided to start a hiking challenge where we were going to try and do like 52 hikes for the year. Obviously there was lockdown in the middle of March, so that kind of went out the window, but one hike we did was from Robin Hood's Bay to Whitby and then back again, which was a really long coastal walk. Midway through that walk, my right knee kind of seized up and I could barely bend it at all, and it just felt so, I don't even know how to, like twingy, and like it was kind of like burning, and it was just a horrible feeling. And because of the last few months of training, I was feeling quite confident about my knee because I haven't really had any issues with it throughout training. I've had shin pain, but nothing with my knee. But today, about mile 9, it just flared up. So in the end, I ended up running the race slower than I was expecting, slower than the one I did in training, because I think, yeah, the combination of hills and my knee just were not on my side. But the main thing is I finished it only a couple of minutes slower than my run that I'd done in training. So I think my training run was 2:38, and according to Strava this one was 2:41, so not too much off, but very happy to have it done. And I can say for sure that while I'm glad to have done the Great North Run once, I will not be going back to do that race again. Definitely going to do other races and events, and obviously keep running myself because I have a marathon next year and also an ultra marathon. But for now I'm just going to enjoy running myself in York, which is a city that I love running in, and no more races for a few months I don't think. But I've done it and I'm very pleased. I also have managed to get sunburnt today. I don't know if you can see my shoulder oh my god, on the back it's so much. Okay, so yeah, sunburnt. I put sun cream on my face, decided not to put it anywhere else, which was clearly a bad idea, but I've done it now, so yay, that is such a relief. And I'm so glad to have this one ticked off the list. Definitely a great achievement. And now I think we're going to order pizza for dinner, despite having pizza last night as well, and enjoy watching House of Dragons this evening because we watched the first episode yesterday before I left and it was so good, so I'm going to watch some more of that tonight. I think my legs are feeling a little bit more normal today, although my right knee still kind of feels like what I'm describing as a creaky door hinge, where it feels like it needs oiling up. My left leg feels absolutely fine, my right one still catching up, but either way feeling a lot better than I was on Sunday evening, where I could hardly make it up and down the stairs without like having to shift my body weight to one side and then the other, so that I didn't actually have to bend my leg, and I kind of just like twisted round from side to side. But all in the name of running, so I can't complain. But anyway, it is now Tuesday, and today is actually the day that the new season of the Great British Bake Off officially starts, which I'm so excited about. Obviously, I've been waiting for this pretty much all year long. I just love Bake Off so much. But mine and Jay's TV for some bizarre reason doesn't work properly. Like, we've never been able to get the actual live TV streaming to work, which is normally absolutely fine because we just watch everything on streaming services, but on like a couple of occasions a year where we watch either Bake Off or The Apprentice when we actually want to watch things live, it's kind of annoying. So that means we won't be watching Bake Off tonight, but instead saving it for tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that. And I've just bought some ingredients to do a little bit of baking, just to have a nice treat to enjoy with Bake Off tomorrow. But for now, it is Tuesday evening. We actually finished watching all of the episodes of The House of the Dragon that are on Now TV already, and it is so good. I am genuinely obsessed. I think it's such an interesting story because obviously the Targaryens in Game of Thrones are just a really intriguing like sort of section of the characters, but actually we only get Daenerys and her story for most of it, and what we know of the Targaryens that came before her is mostly like hearsay, and we don't really get to see it in its reality, whereas in this series obviously it's like well over 100 years prior to Daenerys and her time. But it's so interesting to see the Targaryens at kind of like their height of power and just see all their interactions and all the things that are going on. And it's also, I guess, not that Game of Thrones is hard to follow necessarily, but it follows such a large cast of characters that if you have a favourite storyline, it can sometimes feel as though you see like a snippet of it and then you don't see anything of that again for a few episodes because there's so much like ground to cover. Whereas in this instance, because it's mostly just focusing on the Targaryens and the whole kind of like world sort of orbits around them in this instance, it's kind of nice because you can follow the storylines a lot more closely and you get kind of a bit more action with each episode. So we are both, me and Jay, really enjoying that, and I'm enjoying it so much that because we have to now wait a week for the next episode, I've actually restarted watching Game of Thrones from the very beginning, and that has now inspired me to potentially start reading Game of Thrones, because I started this series good few years ago now. I can't remember exactly what year it was, maybe 2019, because I went down to London for George R.R. Martin to do like an event, and it was very interesting to go and watch him talk. But watched Game of Thrones, which inspired me to read a fantasy series that I never would have otherwise considered, because fantasy is just not my genre. I really don't read much fantasy at all. The only ones I've read are the few of these that I've read so far, Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which again was also good. But I think my kind of like experience with fantasy is that as long as there is a visual aid in the form of a film or a TV series to kind of help me get into it, then I'll enjoy it. But I don't think I can really go into like high fantasy without a visual aid. But obviously with Game of Thrones, I've seen the whole series now, so I did start reading these a few years ago, and then for some reason got through about 3 of them and then just completely fell off the bandwagon. I think because they're so big that they do feel like a bit of a commitment, but not putting any pressure on this one in terms of having to read all of them. But I do kind of fancy getting back into it, so I think I might start reading these ones again. It's been so long that I'm not going to try and pick up from where I was, and instead I'm going to start from the beginning and just see how far I get this time around. Maybe by the time I finish, George R.R. Martin will actually have written or published the next book, which would be nice. So that's what I'm going to be doing in terms of physical reading, hopefully. I thought I would also give you a quick update on my audiobooks that I'm listening to, because I listened to some more of Out and Back. I'm now about 2 hours into this one, so I've got about 4.5 hours left, and this book is so interesting. I think although I'm really enjoying it from the perspective of being a runner and enjoying hearing about other runners, I also just think this story is just so interesting and inspiring for anyone who is having to overcome any adversity. So obviously Hilary was out doing something that she loved, and then an obstacle of the most dramatic sort threw her off course, literally and figuratively, and she had to kind of figure out who she was outside of her hobby and her passion, but also figure out like whether or not she could get back to something that she loved and try to unentangle herself from that being her only form of identity, but also recognise that it's something that she valued a lot. And I just think, although I really enjoy it from the perspective of a runner, I think you could definitely get a lot from this book, regardless of whether you run all the time, occasionally, or never at all, because I do just think that experience of overcoming adversity and trying to figure out who you are in the wake of something difficult is something that a lot of people could relate to or certainly take some value from. So really enjoying that, and that has been my gym listen this morning and will be again tomorrow. Haven't listened to any more of Jeanette McCurdy's book just yet, but I will be doing some more reading of that because that was really interesting as well. So I'm literally spoiled for choice with good books at the moment. So I'm going to go and eat some dinner now. And then Jay and I have started watching Euphoria because, as you might be able to tell, we downloaded a new streaming service, Now TV, to watch The House of the Dragon. And now we're just making the most of all of the things on there, Game of Thrones and Euphoria included. So have a great evening ahead of me and I'll catch up with you later on. I am so excited to watch Bake Off this evening. Made my cake on my lunch break. I ended up going for something very simple and quite nostalgic. Anyone who has gone to school in the UK might recognise like the tray bake cakes that's just like a simple vanilla sponge with icing and then sprinkles on top, and it is just so simple but it hits the spot. And the reason I decided to go super basic for the first episode of Bake Off is because I'm planning to do a bit of a Bake Off bake along like I have done in some respect for the last few years, and I just enjoy so much trying to keep up with the challenges and make bakes that are both vegan and inspired by the Bake Off challenges. So I didn't want to waste anything too extravagant or like expensive really on the first week because this is kind of like not part of the Bake Off bake along. This is just a pre-Bake Off snack that I can enjoy with the first episode because obviously I don't know what I'll be baking in week 1 yet. Have to watch the episode and see what the challenges were. So I'll be making that first bake this coming weekend and I'm really excited to try it and hopefully I'll end up with something good. But for now I just wanted something baked, delicious and very sweet, and that is exactly what I've got here. So very excited to dig into a slice or 3 of that with Bake Off later. But I also did some reading on my lunch break and made a start on my reread of A Game of Thrones, which I'm also really enjoying. I did end up just reading the prologue and then the first chapter really, so I haven't made too much progress, but there was only so much I could fit in along with baking at lunchtime, but I was glad to make a start on at least a little bit of it. And the first thing that struck me, and I think this is something that I noticed in my first read of this book as well, is that right from the beginning, although the Game of Thrones TV series is quite harsh and violent and has like a lot of shocking material, the book instantly just feels that little bit bleaker and harsher, and I think that is just something that comes with the world of fantasy writing. Granted, as I've mentioned, I am not an experienced fantasy reader, I don't read much of this genre, but I do think that authors tend to be more extreme in their books than you would see in the movie or TV adaptations of that same material. So certain things like, for example, characters being so much younger. So even Ned Stark, who is obviously played by Sean Bean in the TV series, who then must have been like, I want to say maybe like 50 at the time of filming. Hopefully that's not offensive if he was younger, but I think he's probably around his 50s at the point of filming season 1 of Game of Thrones. Whereas it mentions here that Ned Stark at the beginning of the book is only 35 years old. So that's like so young to consider that he has 5 children, 6 children actually, 5 true-born children, and then of course Jon Snow. So we've got a 35-year-old man who's married with 6 children, lord of a kingdom, or lord of a realm at least, or like an area of a kingdom, you guys know what I mean. But he's so young, and then it just makes everything that happens seem so much harsher given like how young he is and how much responsibility he has to shoulder at such a young age. And then likewise his children, so Jon Snow is only 14 rather than the 16 that he is at the series, and I'm sure that they mentioned that Bran is 10 in the show, whereas in this he's only 7. So although those are just like small differences, I think it does make a difference in terms of your perception of the things that happen and what the characters are exposed to, because it just seems that little bit more dramatic, I guess, when it's happening to younger people. Don't know if that's just my perception, but it's something that stood out to me. And then also George R.R. Martin, like many fantasy writers, is very descriptive, so I feel like literally like reading the things that are happening rather than just witnessing them in a flash makes them seem, again, just a little bit more raw and harsh in their reality. But I'm really enjoying it, and I think it's going to be fun to rewatch the show at the same time as rereading the books and hopefully try and be like at least somewhat in line. So at the moment I've just watched the first like 2 episodes of season 1, so I'm fairly much like in the right line in terms of where I'm at with the books and where I'm at with the TV show. So excited to carry on with that, excited to watch Bake Off later and eat some cake, so I'll catch up with you when it's time for Bake Off. Yesterday, obviously thought it looked good, but you can only like reserve judgment until you try it, and it was really nice, like such a light and fluffy cake. Obviously very simplistic, no like award-winning flavour combinations, but a major success, especially given the cake catastrophe that I had a few weeks ago when trying to make a birthday cake for my friend Sarah's birthday. And I think that I figured out kind of what the problem was with that cake. Obviously the first, because I had to try and make it twice, the first instance was an issue caused by a chemical reaction between my bicarbonate of soda and the lemon juice that I put in that cake batter, causing it to like poof up and then sink massively. But the second one was a very similar cake batter to the one I used yesterday. The difference being that yesterday I made a fairly flat tray bake, which meant that the actual like end piece of cake was only maybe about that tall, whereas when I was making Sarah's cake I made a loaf, which is obviously a lot bigger. And I think vegan cakes tend to be a bit more delicate because obviously in a standard cake you have egg, which starts as a liquid and then solidifies as it cooks, and that kind of binds the whole cake together, whereas that element is missing in a vegan cake. So my experience, I think, is now leaning towards going for flatter cakes, like either just like a general like circular tin or a tray bake rather than a loaf cake, because I think potentially as the cake cools it's just too heavy and there's too much weight and too much height that it just sinks, whereas when the cake is a bit smaller to begin with, there's not so much like height to lose. So all in all, was a big success, and I'm pleased about that because, like I said, I'm going to be trying to do some baking along with the series of Bake Off, and so it's nice to know that I think I have a cake batter mix kind of thing that I can rely on now going into the series of Bake Off. I say that like there's anything riding on it aside from just my own interest, but it's nice to know that I might actually be able to have some success with cake baking this year. And aside from that, I'm now also just over 100 pages into A Game of Thrones, and I'm really enjoying this book, although I do think it's interesting to go back and, like I said, rewatch and reread the series at the same time, now knowing how the TV series ends, because I think there are certain elements of this book that are now so obvious right from the beginning what is going to be revealed, but the first time watching or reading it, it kind of goes right over your head and you don't pay attention to all of these little hints. But now that you do know, and you're not necessarily paying attention to characters as much because you're familiar with them, you start noticing these smaller details, and there are certain things that I'm like, wow, it's literally right there from the start and it's just staring at you. And the first time you just don't notice it, but then when you go back it's like so obvious. So obviously not going to clarify what I'm talking about, just in case anyone hasn't seen the series, but for those of you who have either read or watched the series, I'm sure you'll know some of the things that I'm talking about, but very interesting and I'm enjoying it. However, one character that I absolutely despise is Catelyn Stark. I just think she is awful. Some of the things that she says to Jon and the way that she treats him is just so disgusting, and I think it's ridiculous that she is able to forgive Ned, have all these children with him and treat him with love and kindness, and yet treat Jon like a piece of dirt. And I think if she had disowned both of them, that would be a different story, but the fact that she is able to forgive the person that she perceives as being in the wrong and yet treats the innocent as someone who has done something wrong is just so horrible, and I absolutely hate it, which is obviously kind of exemplified by the fact that I really do like Jon Snow as a character in both the TV show and the book. So I'm really enjoying watching this unfold, and I'm probably gonna maybe do a little bit more reading now and then maybe watch an episode of the show. I'm now on episode 4, I think, of season 1 of Game of Thrones, so it's a really fun rewatch because it has been years since I've consumed Game of Thrones content, so looking forward to that anyhow. But for now, I feel like because this has been a combination of 2 weeks in one vlog, it's been a bit of a higgledy-piggledy mix of all kinds of things, so I hope you have enjoyed. Next week's vlog should be back to standard procedure because there are no more races and no more travelling for a little while now. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.